Hello, good afternoon, all. So excited to have such a great group on today and to present a PRSA program. I'm Kim Eberhard. I'm the president of PRSA Detroit. Want to thank you so much for joining us today. This program today is particularly special. It's the first in a series of programming that we are working to launch around response to the economic impact of the coronavirus, specifically as it relates to fellow colleagues and professionals in transition. We know it's been a tough time economically in our state, and our communications fellow colleagues have certainly been impacted by that. So again, you'll hear more about that. We have a kind of series of activations and programs we're continuing to launch around those professionals in transition, but this is just such a great way to kick off this series of programming, and so happy to have Christina Stokes with us, who you're going to hear more about in just a second. During this time of professional transition and just uncertainty in general, really encourage all of you to continue to lean into PRSA. In times of uncertainty, professional organizations can certainly provide clarity and guidance and support. So in addition to the ongoing programming we have, we also, you may be aware, on our PRSA Detroit website, launched a COVID-19 resource center that is specific content curated by members, for members, to help navigate the current pandemic and associated communications issues from that. We also have some exciting programming coming up, so encourage you to follow us on all of our social channels to stay in touch with that. In addition to this ongoing programming for those in transition, we also have a social event coming up in July, as well as some other professional development events. So encourage you to follow us on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn to stay connected to that. Speaking of social media, we encourage you all to share thoughts and tidbits and insights from today's webinar using the hashtag PRSADetroit, and we'll be live tweeting on the PRSA Twitter as well. So encourage you to participate and share your thoughts and make it an interactive discussion today. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Michelle Gilbert, treasurer of the PRSA Detroit chapter with Comcast.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Give me a nod. Perfect. All right. So I'm thrilled to be a part of this program. I had an opportunity to speak with Christina. I think it was, I don't even know now if it was earlier this week or last week, but we're in for a real treat. And while I am not in a position right now where I'm looking for a job, I'm going to be taking notes because if there's one thing that we all know, you're only as safe as you think you are, and it's always a good time to be prepared and have your resume in order. So I hope you've got either some paper and pen or a computer to take some good notes on what she's going to share. Rather than reading Christina's bio, I'm going to just let you know she's the Vice President and Director of Talent Acquisition at Rubenstein, which is a PR organization in New York. And I wanted to start, Christina, just by letting you tell us a little bit about your professional journey and how you got to where you are today.
Thank you, Michelle, and hi, everybody. I brought notes of my own because I don't want to forget anything important to share with you today. But a little bit about my path. I was one of those people who did not grow up saying, I want to be a recruiter. So it kind of happened organically, and recruitment and talent acquisition really came into my life through the world of entertainment. I started as an assistant casting director here in New York City, where I've born and raised. My entire professional career has been here. And I was working on casting commercial and print campaigns before I ever stepped foot in a headhunter firm. And executive search was later for me. And throughout most of my 20s, I learned about staffing and recruitment, honestly, from some of the best in the business. I was really lucky to be mentored and supported by the people I worked with. I worked in some staffing firms. You may not know them, different city, different world, but Select Advantage, TTS Personnel, Stephen Bradford Search, and then later Pfeiffer and Company. And in all of those staffing agencies, I was mostly focused on placing talent under the communications umbrella. So it was advertising, marketing, general comms, in addition to other kinds of creative and back office things like digital media and like office administration sorts of positions as well. But I really began focusing heavily on public relations while I was working as a recruiter and an executive talent manager actually at Pfeiffer and Company. And I learned so much about the industry in my relatively brief time there. But because I became familiar with the agency space and the work that PR pros were doing, pretty quickly, MWW recruited me to come lead talent acquisition for them. And I really loved working for one company. So I found that when I hired people and I was still working there and I wasn't just an external consultant, I was able to watch them grow and develop and was able to align really closely with leadership. So through that, I could technically help shape the direction of the organization through the people that were coming in. And that was such a great thing for me. And I really found what I loved. I was recruited by Rubenstein in 2017 to lead their talent acquisition. So very similar role, different organization, also a PR firm. Rubenstein, like Michelle was saying, focuses on strategic communications and reputation management. We have clients in 13 different sectors. So it really runs the gamut, everything from arts and culture to entertainment to sports to corporate and financial services, the legal space, nonprofit. We check many boxes with the kinds of clients that we support and the work we do for them. I've been with the firm for over 3 years now, and I really just love that I'm able to continue doing what I'm passionate about. The people I work with, they're smart, they're sophisticated, they care, and the firm really puts a huge emphasis on ethics. So I'm happy to be where I am. And I wish everybody could be in such a great situation professionally that really aligns with who we are personally too. So that's a little bit about how I got here.
Thank you for that. So, as Kim was indicating earlier in her intro, COVID-19 has certainly impacted people across all industries, including PR and communications. Recent grads are having a difficult time breaking into the profession. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we've got talented, seasoned communication professionals who find themselves without a job. So what job search tips would you give to those looking during this uncertain time?
Right. I mean, I think throughout the course of our conversation today, I'll touch on a lot of different things that you can obviously put together in a way that works best for you. But the reality is many organizations right now are simply on hold with their hiring. So even with states reopening, the focus for a lot of places, my place of work included, is to retain existing staff and navigating the turn that business has taken essentially. And admittedly, with fewer companies taking on interns and hiring entry-level professionals in this remote work environment for the most part, it's going to be very difficult for new professionals to break ground in a job search, more so than it is for someone with a lot of experience under their belt. But right now, it's hard for everybody. I admit that, I know that. And I have conversations with people all the time about the challenges folks are facing. So hopefully I can kind of share some tips that I give to them as well. In both cases, whether you're just getting started, whether you've been working for 20 years, your network is really going to be more helpful than it's ever been before. So this is the time where you want to talk to your professors, your career services centers. You want to actively engage with organizations like the PRSA, participating in things like this today, just to take away whatever you can and implement that. You want to reach out to former colleagues, former bosses, former peers, people who have mentored you in the past. Think about, things are challenging now. You may not get the dream job at this point, but think about PR aligning career paths in some cases that could make a lot of sense to you. Start thinking about the skills that you already have, that you learned in school, or that you've already been using in your professional career, and try to figure out how to align those with something else if you have to. But if you have the luxury to take your time with a job search, then you may even want to consider signing up for a class. You all know in this industry, things change every day. The media landscape shifts constantly. And so what PR and communications professionals have to do has to evolve all the time as well. So there are a lot of free webinars, classes, and even things that may have a cost associated, but consider signing up for a class if you find that your job search is taking a period of time, just to keep your skills sharp, to keep yourself current. And that's also something that you can bring into an interview or networking conversation to discuss things that you are doing right now. Being idle is never the best thing to do. So those are just a couple of things that I think can get us started here that I would always recommend to anybody.
It's great feedback. So I'm going to assume that we will eventually fast forward and things will get a little bit back on track. How do you coach people to stand out in an interview and an application?
I think that kind of the advice that I could give there really could apply for anyone at any point in their career as well. So listen up, right? In most cases, this is something from the other side of the desk that a lot of people don't know. In most cases, a listed position is going to see at minimum around 100 applications, minimum. And for an entry-level opportunity, even more so. So for example, if I list an entry-level account coordinator role on Friday, by next Monday, I have 200 applications. Especially this time of year, they're even more. Just the flow of people coming in and applying is even greater. So it's not easy to immediately stand out, but there are some things you can do to better your chances and increase the opportunity for visibility with hiring managers or recruiters, whoever might be getting their eyes on your materials first. These are some very base things that I think are really helpful. So when you're applying job portal, be it LinkedIn or on a company website, try to keep the first resume that you send, try to keep that one less graphic heavy. That's actually very important to ensure that your materials are properly parsed and scanned by whatever tracking system an organization is using. If your resume doesn't get scanned in properly because there are too many graphics, too many things going on, your profile may never be seen. So that's one very simple thing. Just have a simpler version that's not very graphic heavy, that will be scanned in easily when you upload it. That's one thing. Another tip that I would definitely give, that it really does make you stand apart from other applicants, try to keep track of which resume and cover letter you're sending to each company. You want to look up the people who work at the organization you're applying to, see if you know anybody that works there that might be able to be a referral for you, especially when there are so many applicants right now, especially during a time of economic stress. There are more people applying. Sometimes who you know or who might be able to give you an introduction will be helpful. Not always, but it can help. And definitely do your research. It shows if you don't. If you come into an interview on the phone, on video, in person, whatever the situation may be, if you don't know anything about the company that you're applying to, if you don't remember the details of the job description you applied to, that shows, and it could impact you negatively in the interview process. You may get cut before you even get into the room with the people who are going to make those decisions. So those are some things to keep in mind. Another thing that's really helpful, that works for me, look, every hiring manager, talent acquisition person, recruiter, HR person, they operate differently, and different tactics work better for some than others. But something that works for me sometimes when, I'm one person working on numerous open searches, sometimes it's helpful to have a candidate follow up periodically, not every day. You don't want to be that person, but check in every so often, especially if you're really interested in a role. It's okay if you apply on Monday of one week, you haven't heard back in a week or so, check in again, find out who may have listed the job and send over a note. Hey, I applied for this job a week ago. I'm very interested. If you have 5 minutes, I'd love to introduce myself, but either way, I'm here, I'm interested. And it's just one extra way to get yourself in front of the right people. I think those are probably some good base tips going in to be more visible, to be seen?
Those are great base tips. I'm going to switch the order a little bit of my questions only because of what you've been talking about. And I think this falls in nicely. You know, I've always gotten my next job based on who I know versus applying blindly. And I'm going to assume that that is the case for most people. You know, with that being said, especially for people who maybe are new to an area or they're new in their job search, that might be a little bit more difficult. And I remember when I applied for the job that I'm in now, I was working with someone in talent acquisition. It was actually the first time that I had been working with someone with a TA department. And I remember we developed a really, really nice rapport. And I'm just curious from your vantage point, because of what you do, knowing that the hiring manager has final say, what kind of influence would you say that people in your role have in being able to really make strong recommendations to the hiring manager? And can you speak to the importance of the rapport that the candidate can develop with the talent acquisition team as much as whatever referrals they have?
That's a really good question. I think my recommendation to hiring managers, to leadership, that's step one, right? In the process, most often your first interview is going to be with someone in a position similar to mine, or someone on my team or something like that. And the rapport that you have with that first person is so critical, right? But it's the same as if you walk into an office for the first time. If you're rude to the receptionist is going to tell me, and I'm not going to like that very much. So I think it's important to just bring your best self to the table, no matter who you're dealing with. And that makes a difference. It really does. You want to be respectful and bring your authentic self to the table. If it's the receptionist answering the phone or greeting you in the office, if it's the talent acquisition person that you're having your first interview with, every step of the way, each conversation is the most important conversation, because it's going to get you to the next level. So your behaviors should always reflect that, and you should treat it that way. Does that answer your question? I think it's my recommendation to the hiring managers is critical. If we don't have a good conversation, if I don't get a good feel for your experience, your skills, what you want to do professionally, and I can't bring that back to my team and say, hey, this person deserves a shot. You should interview them and have an additional conversation and dig a little deeper to find out who they are and what they do. And if I can't say that, then I'm not going to make the recommendation in the first place.
Sure. I love the way you said, and I might be paraphrasing here, but each conversation is going to be your most important conversation. It's great advice. So resumes seem to look, read, and feel remarkably different from when I put my first one together many years ago. And actually, I know that a lot of people actually hire resume writers, which feels like an oxymoron considering we're in communications, but I do think that there is a skill and an art to putting together a resume these days. And so for those of us whose resumes could use a good facelift, what kind of advice can you offer? And what would you say the benefits are of going to a professional resume writer versus doing it ourselves?
I think I can answer both of those at the same time in a way. So if you really, really don't know where to start, maybe talk to a professional. But I think the first thing that I tend to tell people to do is to look in your network, look in your field, in this case, look in the PR space, and see if someone has a recommendation for you as far as who you could talk to for professional resume writing or coaching or something like that. One thing that you should all know, you may have seen this in articles throughout your life, but your typical recruiter spends only a couple of seconds on your resume before deciding whether or not they want to keep reading, if they want to look at your cover letter and your supporting materials. So it has to be structured in such a way, even if it's simple, like I said, your first resume that you upload should be a simpler one. You have to find a way to catch the attention in some way, right? So that's not the easiest thing to do. You just want to make sure that you have your materials presented in such a way that I'll keep reading beyond the first couple of seconds. So like you said, we're all writers. It's the communication space. Talking about yourself, writing about yourself is not always the easiest thing to do. A lot of people have trouble with that. You can honestly Google dozens of resume formats and look at your peers on LinkedIn. I really recommend this. Look at your peers on LinkedIn and see how they describe their duties and their accomplishments and everything else, and see what style is easiest for you to consume, right? When you're reading it, what makes the most sense for you? Look at their resumes, look at their profiles, and see what works best, and figure out how you want to best reflect your talents, right? On 1 or 2 pages of a resume. I realize when you've been working for a longer time, it's impossible to keep something so short, but you want to be as concise as you can with your resume, because your work will speak for itself, I think. Basic tips would be to start with your most recent position towards the top. That's a given. You always want to do that. And then work backwards. Focus on your duties and your accomplishments. If you have figures to share, I think it's always important to share. I increased this much. You want to be able to be specific in some ways. And then if you're earlier in your career, definitely keep it to 1 page. There's no reason it should go beyond that. Don't include a photo of yourself. You have LinkedIn for that. Again, that's for 2 reasons. One, it's for diversity recruiting. I don't think that anyone should be immediately judged on their face or anything like that, and you never know who you're dealing with, to be quite frank. So leave your photo off your resume. You have your LinkedIn and your professional social media presence for that kind of thing, and I think we'll probably touch on that a little bit more later. But those are a few things that you can do. Always look and see what people are doing in your field. Look and see who you want to emulate, and that's a really, really great place to start. There are so many different kinds of resumes that I see all the time, and some of them are great. Sometimes I save them, I show them to my team. I'm like, look at this amazing resume. Why don't they all look like this? But it depends on the job. It really does. And you should have different versions to reflect that, I think.
I had not thought about that. So that's really good advice. All right, so I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that, and if you don't have an answer, that is okay. But especially because you talked about, a recruiter will only spend a few seconds on your resume, and I know when it's uploaded into an application process, there's ways that you scan. Are there certain buzzwords that people should use? And then similarly, are there certain buzzwords that you roll your eyes at?
I roll my eyes at most buzzwords these days, but that doesn't mean I won't pick up the phone and call you. I think when it comes to the words that you're using on your resume or your LinkedIn profile, for instance, you want to make sure you're including terminology that is in that job description, because that's what people are searching for, and you want to optimize the search for the recruiter. You want to try to make my job easier, essentially. If you only have your previous company, your title, how long you were there on your LinkedIn profile, for instance, but no details, not even a little paragraph or a sentence about what you did there, it's a lot less likely that you will come up in my searches. Same goes in the applicant tracking system. Let's say I get 300 applications to a vice president corporate communications job or something like that, but you're not using the words that are in the job description that we've posted. You're not using the right terminology for whatever reason. You may not come up in our systems when we're weeding through the profiles and trying to shrink the pool so we know who we want to spend our time on. From 300 applications, we'll focus probably on 50 people, and then we'll weed it down further from there. Decide which 20 we want to get on the phone with, decide which 5 we want to see in person. So the words you use are very important. That's why always look at the job description, make sure that your resume, that initial piece of paper that you're going to, or digital version, whatever that you're going to upload, that you're sending in, it has to somehow measure up, and there have to be dotted lines between those things just so that you get that visibility.
Sure. So when you are interviewing different candidates, I know that there are typical questions that most candidates will ask you back, but are there any standout questions that a job candidate has asked you that's really impressed you?
Mhm. You know, I think about this a lot, and I think it's less the specific question that someone asks and more when they ask it, how they ask it, and that research piece that I talked about in the beginning. When it comes down to the time where our conversation's over, you know, and we're wrapping up, and I say, "Do you have any questions?" That's the big moment. And unfortunately, a lot of the times I have professionals saying, I don't have any questions. You've answered all my questions. Try not to ever let that happen. You know, you want to be able to ask at least one smart question. And a lot of that, it's going to be different for everybody. There isn't any one question that I'm looking for or hoping to hear. I mean, these are conversation starters, you know, the questions that it's a concern when someone has no questions at all. So I think good questions are always around opportunities, who the team members are, what the work culture is like. Tell me about your clients, the work you're doing. How are you strategizing? You know, what can you tell me about how you work with the media? What are expectations required of me in 30, 60, 90? You want to be able to engage and have a dialogue. You don't need to ask all of those questions, but curiosity is so important, especially in the communications field. And being a good question asker is really critical, right? There has to be a better way to say that. Help me out here. But I don't think there's any one question that stands out to me. It's just someone's ability to have a dialogue is critical. Curious.
I think that that makes sense. And I liked how you said, you know, it's the timing and when someone asks a question that's a follow-up to the conversation, it really makes a point that they're paying attention to
Right.
what the conversation is.
Right.
Okay. So you kind of talked about this, or we started to go down this route in one of your last answers. And I know that you're very passionate about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. How important is this to your clients? And how do you think the overall conversation will change or is changing as it relates to all aspects of diversity in light of the most recent national attention surrounding the Black Lives Matter movement?
Thank you. I'm very invested in diversity and inclusion initiatives in the workplace. That's something I'm super passionate about. And in recent years, in my last organization, now with Rubenstein, I've been able to really go deep with that kind of work. I think the response by firms to the Black Lives Matter movement is so important. My firm has been doing plenty of work around BLM with their clients, and we've also been doing a lot of work to address it internally at Rubenstein, so among our staff, and finding ways to have these conversations. Some of them are difficult conversations, but you can't be afraid to be uncomfortable at this point, you know. Personally, I'm just excited to see that organizations are making strides towards real change. They're taking things seriously. They want things to be better for their employees. They're making change around policy and resources and more. So when you're looking for a new position in a climate like this, and maybe this is veering off from the question line a little bit, I think for whoever you are personally and what's important to you, it's a great time to see if a firm or an organization, a PR agency, wherever you're looking to work, look and see if they've been silent about this stuff, and or if they too have stepped up, taken a stand, made a statement, what they're doing around what's happening in the world. You know, I think this is a really good time to look at those things. I think the conversation around race and diversity and equity and inclusion, it has been becoming more prevalent in corporate America for a long time already, which is great, but more so now than ever before. So this is really just, it's an amazing opportunity, right? For all of us to fight for change and to make sure that it's enduring beyond this point. It's not just a checkbox moment. I'm proud to be with a firm that's taking it seriously and really like just addressing it and having the conversations from the top down, you know. And I think this movement is going to open up opportunities for people of color, for Black professionals, all across the spectrum. I think at every level in the PR industry and in other industries too. This is a great moment. It's based on a lot of painful things, but it's a good moment to make change. And you should look at the companies that you're interviewing with, look and see what they're doing around this kind of stuff. It's very important. It really is.
Thank you for that. I know that some of you are chatting, and then there are some questions coming in the Q&A, and I just want to reinforce, we are going to leave plenty of time for questions, and Jamie is going to help with that. We thought just for the ease of flow, we'll get through my questions with Christina, and then we're going to transition. And I know that Christina has been very generous, and if we run out of time, or if you have a question that comes up afterwards, she has encouraged everyone to connect with her on LinkedIn, and she's happy to continue answering those questions. So I always reinforce to my team not to be afraid to fail, because that's how we learn and grow. So if you would be so bold in sharing with us about a time that you failed, Christina, and what you learned.
I think there are probably plenty of those moments. You know, failure is a funny word. I think it's a part of life. It's not a bad thing. Glass half full. It's a learning opportunity. I kind of, when I think about failure, I think about the time when I felt that way most frequently for a period of time. And I think it was after, in the last economic crisis in 2010, I had at the end of it, I had my first layoff, and it was at the tail end of the last recession. Honestly, I learned so much during that period of my life, and a lot of it's kind of what I've been sharing with you guys around how to address that. But it's a little bit like, how do I tap into my network? How can I be fearless about new opportunities? How can I look at my career path differently and reshape who I am professionally to continue to survive, right? How to rework a resume for every opportunity that I'm going for. I mean, during that period, I got so many rejections, Michelle. I was looking at headhunter firms and in-house opportunities, and I got so many no's before the yeses started coming in. And I was really trying to shift every time I got a no, and I felt like a failure more than ever in my life. Getting the no's, getting lost in a sea of applications, not hearing back. It's really hard. And you really just have to be good to yourself during periods like that, and take it a day at a time. Try to look at each opportunity as a learning experience. Ask for feedback if people are willing to give it to you, right? I mean, I just tried to be kind to myself in those really hard moments during that period of time. And I grew a lot. I don't think I'd be who I am professionally now, or as a person, if it wasn't for that period of time, as unpleasant as it may have been for the most part, but it helped, and I learned, you know.
No's can be very difficult to accept, and to not feel bad about yourself. And I appreciate the words about being kind to yourself. And I know that I have, I look back now, and it's easy for me to realize that there was a path that was intended to be had, but in the moment it was so difficult. But, you know, I always believe, and this is just me, that sometimes that no happens because the right opportunity is right around the corner. And when you're in that moment, though, it's so hard to kind of see the forest through the trees. So
it is.
There's not really a question there. That was just more my ad lib. So, all right. Here's a question. After an interview, should you write a thank you note? Should it be typed or handwritten? Or do you send a thank you email? How do you stand out? And are any of them acceptable? Does it depend on who you're interacting with?
I think it always depends. I've had people where I have an initial conversation. I think it goes great. and they don't follow up with me, but I put them forward anyway. You know, again, every recruiter, every hiring manager, they operate differently and they look for different things. So always keep that in mind. If I don't get a thank you note, it's not the final make or break for me, but it always helps to get one. So my advice is to always, always, always send a thank you note, even if it's just after a phone interview, no matter who the person was that you had the conversation with. Someone gave you their time, and it means a lot, and you have to be able to send a thank you for that, right? So no matter who the person was that spent their time with you, emails are excellent. They are. That's how we communicate these days, but tailor them. Make sure you're including 1 or 2 details from the conversation you just had. It doesn't need to be a 3-page essay, okay? It can be a paragraph, but include something about the conversation you just had, just to show that you were engaged, that you are still interested, you were paying attention, and that makes it more personal, more authentic to the person that you spoke with. I think handwritten notes are lovely. I get plenty of them, and every single one I get, I put up on the pin board in my office, okay? My team teases me about it all the time. I have hundreds of them, and I think I keep them though. They mean something to me. They're just not as timely as an email, so you want to stay top of mind. And I know that writing that handwritten note and walking to the mailbox, it's an extra step, but honestly, why not both?
Sure. Great advice. And I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to assume that, you know, even if you're not interested, if it doesn't feel like the right opportunity, I think it's always appropriate to write that thank you note to anyone you spend time with, because you never know when that person who you interviewed with, where else they're going to land, or if they might think of you for another opportunity that you both feel is the right fit. So I think it's just, in general, good advice to always follow.
That is a great point. I obviously handle the talent acquisition only for my firm, Rubenstein, but I can not tell you how frequently it is that my colleagues will come to me and say, hey, my client has an opening for this internal role on their PR team. Who have we spoken to that maybe wasn't the right fit for us? And I keep those people in mind and I make those recommendations. So you're absolutely right.
Great. So you mentioned social media earlier, so I want to kind of shift into that. How do you recommend people use social media for professional and networking purposes? And I'm going to assume, I mean, we probably don't need to cover on this call what not to do, because I think the people on this call are probably smart enough to understand, lose the pictures with the beer cans or whatever else. But using it professionally, what makes sense and what should you use?
So this day and age, if you're not using LinkedIn to network with past and present colleagues, people in your industry, people that you look up to, people that you want to emulate, or whatever else, you are missing out on a massive opportunity. The majority of recruiters, hiring managers, that is where they go first. It's the easiest way to network and connect with people. I've made hundreds of hires, if not more, primarily through LinkedIn. That is not the only resource I use by any stretch, but hundreds through LinkedIn alone over the course of my career. And I've made such valuable connections through the platform too, outside of even people I've just hired. So utilize that. And also, I think having complementary professional social profiles on Twitter or Instagram to boost your professional image, that could be really helpful too. It's whatever works for you. It is a lot of work to to maintain your professional brand across all of these platforms, but especially when you're looking, it really is worth it sometimes. The news you read and share, the blogs you're writing, the subject matter that interests you, these things showcase themselves across your platforms, be it LinkedIn or whatever else that you're using. So it's part of who you are. It's your professional image. And I think using social media to increase the visibility of who you are in that way is a critical tool at this point where we are right now. So LinkedIn first and everything else to follow, but rope them all together somehow.
Perfect.
And please never have an avatar where you're holding a beer can. Look, we all like to have fun, but it's just stick professional, and then we'll go from there.
Right. Got it. Um, Lots of large companies, most large companies, have a comprehensive online employment application process that can be overwhelming and maybe even discouraging at the same time. Do you have any tips on how not to get lost in the sea of online job applications? And I know you touched on this a little bit earlier with keeping the resume simple. Anything else that you want to add just in terms of how to not get frustrated with the process?
I think we'll get frustrated regardless, right? I mean, looking for a job can feel like a full-time job. For some people it is. I know, I've been there. I know how frustrating multiple rounds of interviews can be, and how hard it is to send in an application and never hear back at all, or to make it past a conversation just not to see any decision or anything happen for months. There are so many people involved in an interview process. Things change internally at companies all the time. It's not always you. Sometimes the process needs improvement. Sometimes the people helping to get you through the door, they just, at one point they have control, and then it's just what happens after that, you know? So it's hard not to get frustrated. And it's part of the challenge of being 1 in 100, like I was saying before. But look, every person's unique. You all have something different to bring to the table, something valuable, something special. When you have the opportunity to get on the phone, just, or in person or whatever, on a video, show them who you are, talk about what you're capable of, but honestly, be willing to learn. Reach high, but be humble. Don't reach too high. If you just graduated, please don't apply for the VP job. Just to give yourself an opportunity to get there. You will get there, but you have to work for that. You know, you have to learn. Be realistic, but don't sell yourself short. Always do your homework. I'll say that until I'm blue in the face. Please do your homework. Do a little bit of research. I mean, it's a very rough time to be looking for a new opportunity right now. I get that. Whether it's going to be your first job out of college, or whether you've been working for so long and you're just having a hard time getting back. I get that. I get that it's hard. Don't give up. Try to stay positive, you know.
Great, thank you. So I have one last question. It's not necessarily about looking for a job. And then I know we've got a lot in the chat, so I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for that. You know, this has been a stressful time for probably everyone, and everyone's managing it differently. And I know that I get energized when I share with people or get ideas from people on how they've been de-stressing. So besides work, how do you keep busy during COVID-19, knowing that I know you're in New York, most of us, I believe, are in Michigan, so we're kind of starting to open up, but we're still, you know, wearing the masks and, you know, having some trepidation. You know, how do you de-stress, and how do you spend your time besides working behind your computer?
It's really funny that you asked that. The next article that I wrote for the Hire and Seek column that I write for PRSA Strategies and Tactics is pretty much exactly that: how to keep your mental health and well-being top of mind while you're looking for a job, and just in general in life. I am not a psychologist, but I look, at the time of this Q&A, I have been in isolation at home with my partner, with my 5-year-old daughter, our 2 cats, for over 100 days. That is a long, I've never been home for 100 days in my life, okay? I haven't been on a train or a bus. I don't drive, so if I can't walk there, I'm not going. This is a new world for me here in New York. And look, in addition to work, I've been homeschooling, cooking more than ever, which also is a positive and a negative. I've been engaging in a lot of different creative things. I'm making candles now. What is that? I'm baking more often. I'm painting. I didn't know I could do any of these things, and that's just a few. But I've also been actively supporting all the civil rights activities going on, donating money where I can, raising visibility when I have my free time, and tuning out periodically as well, because the news cycle, we all know this in this industry, we have to watch the news. It is our job to watch the news, but my God, you have to turn it off every so often. I think earlier on, back in March, when this all started for us here, the stress and isolation was just really, it was really overwhelming. It was a lot to get used to, and that first month was really hard. But my family and I, we've found a rhythm. I think we have at this point a lot more good days than we have bad. And it's getting better. So my advice around that, stick with routines. Read my article when it comes out, because I talk a lot about this, but I think routines have been really helpful for all of us in my household. We all have different things that we're doing, that we're responsible for. And I'd recommend the same for anyone who's looking for work at this time, and you might find that you have more idle time. Keep your routines anyway. It keeps you sane. It really does. And don't be afraid to ask for help. That's been a huge obstacle for me. And I try not to be afraid to ask for help when I need it, or to take a break when I need it too.
That's awesome. Thank you. Well, so that concludes my questions. Jamie, I'm going to ask for your help, because I like to surround myself with people who make me look better, and technology is not my thing. So Jamie, if you could help us get through the questions, maybe in the order they've come, filtering out anything that may have been duplicative.
Sure. We had a lot of questions about LinkedIn. So first, do you have any tips on how to frame your LinkedIn profile if you're a seasoned professional? Mm-hmm. And we had a couple questions about, what's your opinion on putting a graduation year down? Does that sort of age you, or is that helpful? And then do you prefer an online portfolio, or is just a really robust LinkedIn profile with attachments and documents something that's more helpful than that?
All of these things. So when you're a seasoned professional, I know, look, ageism is a real problem in a lot of places. Again, I'm grateful at Rubenstein. I have colleagues that have been with the firm for over 40 years. The experience as a huge benefit, and that's a great thing. So look for places like that for sure. When you frame your career, I think it's important to talk about what you've been doing most recently, always, because part of the challenge is staying current and presenting yourself as someone who knows what the business is now, not what it was when you had to drop a book of clips on someone's desk and that was how you showed your client how great a job you were doing. It's very different now. So you want to be able to be current. You want to be able to talk about what you've been doing most recently. Be honest, be transparent, be yourself. I sit with some of my executive team members at the firm sometimes as well to walk through their profiles. Some people choose to use third person, some choose first person. I think since a resume tends to be third person, sometimes it's okay to come across in that first person way. Just be honest, don't lie, we find out, and just frame it in a way that works best for you. Like I said before, look at your colleagues on LinkedIn or people in similar roles and see how they do it and kind of work in a way that works for you. You don't have to copy anybody. I think there's a lot of different strategies. Around college year, graduation year, I noticed that once someone is past a certain point in their career, they tend to put their college at the very bottom of their resume, if they include it at all. When you're earlier in your career, you tend to have it right at the top underneath your name. And that's a normal thing that I see. I see people start to take the year off after a while, and they might just bullet out some of their earlier experiences instead of listing the years. I completely understand why you do that. I wish that you did not have to do that, but I get it. And I think it's okay that you do that. Just make sure you're putting your most recent stuff with detailed dates and everything else, your last 3 jobs, be specific about that kind of thing. And it shouldn't hurt your chances at all. What was the other question?
To sort of piggyback on that, you mentioned like your last 3 jobs. How far back in employment history is reasonable? Does it reach a point of diminishing returns when you're going back a little bit too far? Or do you look for 3? Do you want to see more than that?
I mean, it kind of goes to how long people are really spending on your resume. I definitely want to see what you've been doing in the past 10 years, right? The past 10 years are going to be the most relevant. But if you started as a journalist in the 90s and then you transitioned into government and then you transitioned into a PR firm, I love to see those stories, but that's me. That's me. I really like to see the stories, and I read a little deeper than some people do. I think that if you're extremely detailed about your 2 or 3 most recent jobs, and then you bullet out some of your earlier experiences and just be willing to talk about those things if they come up, that can be sufficient on a resume. On LinkedIn, I list everything I've ever done. A lot of people don't do that. They keep it a little more concise as well. It's up to the person, but in your summary, you can say, maybe you only have the past 2 jobs listed, which covers the past 10 years of your career. But in your summary, you could say, I'm a seasoned professional with 25, 30, 40 years of experience. And you can present it that way without having to have a profile that goes on for pages and pages and pages. So just think about someone's time, I guess, and
Sure.
how long they're able to focus on any one thing when you're fleshing it out.
And so thinking about that seasoned professional, we have somebody in the chat who unfortunately her job was recently eliminated due to an acquisition. So 20 plus years experience in sort of the same type of industry, loved the job. And the job skills are obviously transferable, but she rarely sees job posts in the industry for that amount of experience. Do you have any suggestions for how a job seeker of that caliber would look for a good fit?
You know, I had this conversation with my team recently. I noticed that some organizations won't actively list a job for extremely senior level talent. Sometimes they'll go straight through a headhunter. So in a case like yours, you may want to make sure that you're allying yourself with staffing agencies that support your industry and your line of work so that they can work on your behalf. At my firm, we tend not to hire at the most senior roles. We like to hire at something 1 or 2 levels more junior and develop someone internally so that they can then fill into and that's a lot of what's going on. So you don't want to have to take a job that's much more junior than what you bring to the table. Sometimes you might have to take a step back in order to work your way up, but don't sell yourself short. I would genuinely advise you to work with search firms and headhunters that might be able to support your search in that regard if you're having challenges finding jobs for your caliber of experience.
Okay, sounds great. And then just a question about resumes. Do you ever put resumes to the side knowing that a company might be going in a particular strategic direction down the road, or do you always start from scratch with each new job that you're searching for?
Oh God, if I always had to start from scratch, I don't know. I definitely hold on to the profiles of people or flag the profiles of people that could be interesting for things down the line. And I'm a huge networker. I talked about that a lot during our call today. So if you applied for something and maybe it's not going to be right for that, I'll probably still make time for you. So I see a lot of professionals in roles like mine that do the same. Who we know and who we've had conversations with, whether or not we had anything for them at the time, is very important to us. And I have a lot of relationships with people that I first spoke to 3 years ago, but didn't have anything for them until now. And I was able to move forward at that point. So I definitely put profiles to the side.
Sure, sounds good. And so we have somebody who says they're interested in opportunity to learn and develop new skills. But how do you sort of say that on a resume without making it sound as though you don't have that experience, but you're eager to learn? How is that viewed?
I think your cover letter is super important for things like that, right? I mean, it's a cover letter is kind of like that handshake, right? So it's your first introduction, and it's a chance for you, outside of listing the things that you already can do, it's your way to say, these are the places where I really want to grow and I believe I can do that with you. And you kind of talk about that in that way. I think a LinkedIn summary and a cover letter are both good places to be able to express those things. And I was saying before, like curiosity and wanting to learn and grow and everything else, that's so important for me to see in people. So find a way to tie that into your search somehow and in one of your materials, not necessarily your resume.
Great tip there. Going back to LinkedIn just a little bit, how would you differentiate your LinkedIn and other job profiles from a company application system where you often duplicate the same type of information over and over again?
So I think it depends on how the company lists their jobs. For us, we may post something on LinkedIn, but when you go to apply, it will throw you right into our applicant tracking system website where you'd answer a couple of questions and upload your materials. Sometimes you can apply directly through LinkedIn. There are a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes we're getting too many profiles. We really need you to go to our website and answer a couple of questions to help us narrow it down a little bit. I'm a talent acquisition team of 1 on a 6 in a company that's 160 people. So I have a lot of things that I'm responsible. So it kind of depends on how a company's structured, what their system will look like.
Sure.
You're going to find yourself repeating a lot of the same things all the time as you search for jobs. You'll have to apply in multiple places, probably have to fill out more than one thing. It's very time consuming. It's not easy.
And so just another thought on LinkedIn. We've talked about LinkedIn a lot. Obviously, it's the place to be for networking. What are your thoughts on having a photo on LinkedIn versus not including a headshot? So we talked a little bit about having those headshots. Would you advise putting that professional picture out on LinkedIn? Or as you sort of mentioned, if they're sort of looking to like fill a certain, is that a bad thing to do?
I don't think it's necessary to have a picture on your resume for sure, but yes, on LinkedIn, be a real person. We're in a world where there are a lot of fake accounts and all kinds of things. It's helpful to have a photo. This is just statistically speaking from learning events that I've attended with LinkedIn. People who have a current photo, whether it's an iPhone portrait photo, a professional headshot, or just a nice picture, they get more visibility. They get higher level of responses on job applications than people who choose not to include a photo at all.
Sure. And it looks like we've got one final question. Any advice on how to be considered for a role that is lower paid or a lower level than your most recent position? And the flip side of that being, how do you recommend job seekers make a decision before they just take a job versus the job?
Okay. We're in a recession kind of environment, right? A lot of people are unemployed right now. Some people are trying to have to convince employers to take a shot on them, even though they have more experience than the job is calling for. They're trying to convince employers, trust me, I earned this much at my last job. If you don't have to share that legally, by the way, but this is paying less than I previously earned, but I'm comfortable with that. And a lot of employers might be frightened by that. You know, they might be worried that someone's just going to want to get a promotion right away and they're just getting their foot in the door. Be humble, be authentic, be willing to have those conversations around salary when they come up. And, you know, I always try to say, don't settle for less than you deserve, but be humble and realistic as well about the state of the world. And then when it comes to accepting a job because you really need a job or waiting for the job, if you have the luxury to really wait for what feels like the best opportunity, then do that if you can. But if you just need to get to work, there is value in every position that you have. You're going to learn something in every role. It may not be the dream, but the dream will come. So always be open to having conversations. Don't say no when it comes to an opportunity to network with something that could be the next best thing for you. I realize that the dream is to be able to put roots down in a company where you're really happy, where you're doing everything that you always wanted to do. You're making an impact, you're getting opportunities, you're growing, you're developing. It's everything, you know, whether or not you're in the beginning or later in your career. That's not always the case though, but learn what you can and always do a great job, because your referrals and your references mean so much in the job search process, maybe now more than ever when so many people are out of work. Those conversations we have with referrals are really important. So you want to always do a good job and don't burn your bridges. If you don't have to, don't.
And it looks like that prompted a follow-up question. When is the right time to bring up the salary conversation?
I tend to have that conversation pretty early on with people. I might be on the phone with someone for the first 20 minutes that I've known them, and I'll say, I know we've only known each other for 20 minutes, but what are you looking for? You know, obviously I don't expect to hear about what someone was earning. That's not important. I want to be able to present someone in the right frame. They might be asking for more than we have, you know, or they might be open and not ready to have that conversation yet, but I always try to have that conversation early on. So when you go into any interview, any step of the way, be ready to have that conversation. Think about the range, at least think about a range, not a total package. That's obviously a discussion for much later when you're close to an offer, hopefully, but think about the range that you want to be in. And you can check on LinkedIn or Glassdoor or any of those websites to see, give or take, what people at that company or in that industry, what they might be earning from the self-reported salaries of current and former employees, and that could help you. But don't be afraid to have those conversations early on.
Okay, and I want to be respectful of time. I know we're at that hour. We have one last question, if you could just quickly answer it. Do you know some of the names of headhunter staffing agencies that people might be able to check out? And how do you feel about getting additional certifications through LinkedIn?
I think LinkedIn certifications are great. And if you have I think if you have some kind of like paid profile, you have access to all their training and everything, and they have so many. Tap into those. They're really great. Some of them are super intuitive. I've used plenty myself. So definitely use those. As far as staffing firms, get back to me on that directly. I'm not sure if any of the national organizations that I've worked with, as far as headhunters, whether I've worked there or utilized their services in the past, I'm not sure who's working in the Detroit area necessarily, but I can list some out for you guys afterwards. So if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, I can try to point you in the right direction.
That'd be awesome. Thanks so much. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Michelle. Thanks for answering everybody's questions.
Thank you.
So I just want to, first of all, I want to say thank you to you, Christina, for your authenticity, your passion, your great advice. It was very engaging. I took a lot of notes, and I learned a few things about what I need to do with my LinkedIn profile, with my resume, just steps that I can take now, because I think the key is, even if you're not looking for a job right now, there are things you can always be doing so that when that time does come, you're prepared. I also want to say thank you to everybody who joined this call. Outstanding questions. It was such an amazing discussion, and really, you know, again, gave me a lot to think about. So I hope everybody got something out of it. I'm 100% sure everyone did. And I encourage you all to connect with Christina, and have a great rest of your day. And thanks for joining us. Keep an eye on PRSA Detroit's website for more programming.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, everybody. Have a great day.